Oh, goodness. The video thing is off. Give me a second here. I'm not sure what happened. I'm going to close out for a moment and fix this, and then I will be right back. Okay, I hope that works. um, can you see me? Can you hear me? Am I on? Am I good? Please let me know if I'm actually on or if it just looks like it on my end. So I'm hoping that this is working. I was having some tech issues with the video. So yeah. Glenda, can you see me and hear me all right? Am I on? Can you hear me? Okay, good. Okay, good. Okay. Excellent. Excellent. Yeah, this is a whole new system for me. So if there's like a tech thing, I'm like, "Oh my God, what do I do?" I haven't done this before, so it's all new. All right, so I'm excited about talking about everything today. I know we went through a lot of stuff yesterday, really kind of diving into like understanding more about ourselves, right? Let me get my notes up here too. I had to change everything. Do, 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 do. All right. Okay. So yeah, we're really learning about like who am I? Why am I here? What are these energies? What is this source energy that wants to come through me, that wants to like live and experience this human, reality and this human life through me? And how can I step into that? How can I be more of that true frequency? Now, I know that it can get a little bit confusing yesterday when I'm talking about, your true frequency, versus your dominant frequency and all these things. And again, these are words and the words are not the thing. And so it can be really easy to get caught up in what does this word mean? Because then when I can understand the word, then I can start to really embody what the meaning is. So, right now, there's probably going to be moments where like it's challenging to fully understand what I'm talking about, and that's okay. So just bear with it, bear with me with all of this. That this is a journey that's unfolding for you, and this journey of this unfolding is why you're here. To really start to open up to this true self. Because the thing is like what I was talking about yesterday. Remember how I was talking about how you're like this infant, right? You come into this world and you don't know what to do. You've forgotten, or you may have forgotten, like why you're there and what's going on, or you go through that period of forgetting and into this period of like adaptation. How do I adapt myself, to survive? And this personality, this adaptation is that dominant frequency. The dominant frequency is that survival self. Okay, yay, thank you. No worries. I haven't really started too much on it, so you're good. Um, so this dominant frequency is that survival adaptation. It's who you default to in order to like make it through life and make it through circumstances and all those different things. And so, Glenda, you had mentioned something before we even got on. Let me look at your notes here. So, you had mentioned about, is it possible for the dominant energy to be running the show when so much is coming at us? And don't worry, I'll get to your Neville Goddard in a minute. But when so much energy is coming at us and other people can be controlling and life can be overwhelming. And so the dominant frequency is our default. It's what we go into as our protection mechanism. It's and you can look at it as the ego personality, and it's the parts of ourselves, like, this is how I know how to be, this is how I know how to behave to navigate reality, especially during high stress situations. So in those situations where you're talking about, like, other people will be controlling and life is overwhelming and like all this stuff is coming at us, like, then that's the default of, yeah, I know that I can survive because you've done it before. You've done it as a young person, and throughout your life, you're like, I know that I can survive in this default personality. So this is the challenge, though, because then you're always going back to the survival personality instead of the thriving personality. So you're always like adjusting based on fear, and the voices that you're listening to inside of yourself is your fear. So you're more focused on, what do I need to do to protect myself? How do I need to survive in those things? And that survival mechanism will keep you in that dominant frequency, that highway of fear and protection. So does that make sense? I hope that makes sense with that. So yeah. As far as, I'm just going to answer this and then start heading into the whole talk. But you had mentioned about Neville Goddard, and the energy of certainty. And I haven't studied enough of his, so like I can't speak to it too much. But my understanding about this is that it's very similar. It's very similar. So the thing is about that element of certainty, it's like you are so certain about yourself, that it just becomes a natural extension of you. And that's when you can really start stepping into that true frequency of who you really feel that you are. And that does become then your dominant frequency. That becomes the new dominant frequency, right? So instead of your fear-based self, your fear-based adaptation, which is currently your dominant frequency, then that eventually becomes your true frequency, eventually becomes the dominant frequency, if that makes sense. So yeah, Neville definitely has an understanding of that, and it is learning how to embody. It's about learning how to embody that true frequency with so much certainty that nothing like moves you away from that. But that means that you've worked through all what we're talking about today, the interference, all the fears and the wounding and the different things that create the lack of certainty of that identity. So yes, he has absolutely the right idea with that. And the work is about doing the work with the interference and doing the work that we're going to talk about on day 3, and all the things that need to occur in order to step into that certainty so that you're just living from that embodiment. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. So you said, if we are not protecting, then how does our true self respond? Through truth, through presence. So, and we'll get into this in day 3, so don't worry. But yeah, so right now, most of us are responding out of fear and old programming, which is what we're going to talk about today. So we're going to go into all of these things. So hold tight, and yeah, day 2, day 3, we're going to go into all these things. So, yep. Keep up with the great questions. I am loving this both here and in Telegram. If you're not in Telegram, make sure that you get in Telegram because I am in there day and night answering questions. So the thing is that like this environment, this 3 day environment, the way that you're going to get the most out of it is by putting like both feet in and being all in on this. Ask questions, put yourself out there, be vulnerable with this, be willing to go deep, because the more that you do that, the more that you're really actively taking this time to do that, you're helping yourself to make these changes. Like, I'm here for you in these 3 days. I'm here to support you. And so, like, don't miss out on this opportunity, you know? All right. Hey, good to see you. All right, so yeah, let's dive in. Oops, oh, why is my buttons not working here? There we go. There we go. All right, so this identity, and again, I want to say like your dominant frequency, right? But really, it's just the identity that you created in order to feel safe, right? So as that young person, remember how I was talking about yesterday? You're that young person, and then you're drawing at on the walls, and having that experience, and suddenly there's trauma, right? And then you created a new identity, which is, as a young person, you think like, I need to adapt. I have to adapt to this in order to survive. So what I've just done is not safe, because if I'm upsetting my parent and then these things are happening, then my life starts getting dicey, right? So I need to adjust. I need to adjust myself, which means I'm either dimming my light, I'm changing my behavior, essentially, so the first person that we were when we're born is our true self. That's our true radiant self, like in that moment of like wanting to be that full self-expression of like love and compassion and connection and creativity and self-expression and all those things, right? Like you're wanting to be all of those things. And you're trying to be those things. And then each moment that you try to be your authentic self, that environment may or may not be receptive to that. And it has nothing to do really with you. And it has everything to do with all those other people's like traumas and limitations. So they're seeing you, and they're either threatened by that, or that brings up some things for them, or whatever it is, right? So then you think like, oh, this is me, this is my problem, I've done this, so I need to change these things and I need to protect myself. So you create this persona that is your protection, right? So in order to feel safe, you have learned to become somebody else. So that is the challenge right there, right? And in those moments that you're doing that, you're actually leaving yourself. You're putting your authority into somebody else. So like in that moment when you're the little kid, right, and you're drawing on the walls, you're not an adult mind enough to be able to stand up for yourself, right? Because you're dependent on them for your food and your survival, and you don't know better and you don't understand these things, right? So you don't have the adult capacity to be able to stay with your own power and rationalize it with the adult mind. So you give your authority away, right? So that's what I mean by how did I learn to leave myself? So in each of those moments, you're like, that person's correct. Or I need to follow how that person does it. Or I'm wrong. I need to change myself. I need to modify who I am. And all of those moments where we learn, that it's not safe to be who I am, or I'm not loved in this way, or I need to change myself, all of those moments, you're leaving yourself, you're abandoning yourself, but you're abandoning yourself to survive, right? And so, but you're not, the thing is that even though you are abandoning yourself, so to speak, right, that self is still there. It's just underneath all the protection and all the layers and all the dimming of your light and all those different things. So, yeah. So the thing is that this process was a good thing, like in that time, it's what really kept you safe. And it's the part of you that's trying to keep you safe and trying to love you and trying to take care of you. So even though like right now, I'm sure that it feels incredibly frustrating that you're being held back by this part of yourself and you keep on coming back into this like mechanism of self, just know that you don't want to villainize this part of you, because this part of you is simply trying to love you and protect you in the best ways that it knows how, but it's doing it based on parameters from the past, and it's not assessing like what is really true in this moment. And so the work that we're really going to be talking about tomorrow is learning how to do that. Like how do you like learn how to come back to what is really true in this moment instead of being on autopilot reaction into our wounded state, because this is what's happening. We're constantly ending up in this autopilot reaction because of these triggers and these different things. And so we just react and go back into that dominant state instead of assessing, well, what is really true in this moment, and like how do I need to respond to this moment, differently. So, yeah. And this whole this whole process of doing this, of abandoning yourself, of like all of this, like it says, belonging and fitting in, and like all of the things that you're doing come with a price. It's somewhere along the way you learned that who I naturally am isn't always safe to be. So you adapted. You became more of what kept you safe and less of what felt true. And like this is one of the challenges. I was talking with someone earlier today. Hello. when I was talking with someone earlier today, and they're like, "Well, I've been doing this for 45 years, right?" Same here, right? I have been doing this my whole life. I have been going into this adaptation of self, my entire life. So it feels like impossible. Like, how do I change that? How do I free myself from this pattern, this cyclical pattern of like looping and looping and going right back into, these things that are costing me, right? That I'm the one that's consistently now dimming my light because I am taking over that role that everybody else has been doing, and that becomes my internal, dialogue, about those things. So this is what we're going to be talking about today. For sure. And here we go, right? So that internal dialogue of like the things that we grew up with. So the narratives that we heard, like you need to be quiet, like we don't want to hear what you have to say, then you interpret that as like I'm not important. My voice doesn't matter. who I am doesn't matter. So like the things that happen to you, you create a narrative about it. You create a belief about it. And then those beliefs stay in you and become your internal narrative like all the time. But the thing is that most of those internal beliefs, most of those internal stories are not yours. They are what other people have told you, and they are those other people's problems. They are not yours. For an example, if you're dealing with, like, say, a situation like that where, you're being told that your voice doesn't matter and all those different things, more than likely that person who's telling you that experienced that themselves, and they're just replaying the same wounding that they experienced, the same belief structure that they experienced, and giving it to you. So now you're living that narrative, and you're creating that belief structure with those narratives, and then those narratives become your internal voice, your internal fears, your internal dialogue, your way of beating yourself up all the time, the things that you're telling yourself all the time. So, and that's the funny thing. That's one of the things that I realized, even recently. I was thinking about the internal voice, and realizing that we often call this internal voice, like the inner critic, or, the inner judge, or, oh, I remember those are my parents' voices, or whatever, and all these things, right? And so we tend to put it into like framing of, oh, it's out there, like that's them, that's outside of me. And the thing is that the voice that's inside of you that's saying those things, even if they are like your parents' voices or things like that, that's you. That's a part of you that believes that that's true, and believes that, so that it's trying to protect you. So it has adopted those beliefs and those narratives in order to keep you safe, but they're somebody else's. They're not even yours. So yeah, they're given to you, like I said, by someone else, by family, by society, culture, media, religion, advertising, relationships, school, you name it. And the thing is that we are allowing all of those people and those things to dictate and to define what is true for us. And we've done that. We've done that our entire lives, instead of really starting to assess what is true for me, what is really true for me, and really start listening to and honoring that. So yeah, that's part of the work too. I'm going to look at your notes here. Yes, children should be seen and not heard. Yes, I know, right? Layers upon layers of programming, masking in order to survive. Yeah, 100%. 100%. But that's what's so, it's going to sound funny, but that's what's so beautiful about it, because like, this is the thing that's kept you, I'm going to get emotional about it, but this is the thing that's kept you safe. This is the thing that's been loving you so much, because it's been a part of the pain and the suffering that you've gone through, right? And it's like, I don't want you to go through that again. So this is the mechanisms that we've built to try to keep you safe. But after a while, that mechanism is no longer like working in the same way that it was originally designed to. And now it's keeping you limited and in that same like kind of wounded space, instead of really stepping into your true self. Because your true self, like being your true self as a kid, didn't feel safe. Right? So trying to be your true self as an adult triggers all those fears, right? Well, Well, when I was doing that before, when I was doing it a kid, it was not safe to do that. So why would it be safe now? Right? But as an adult, you have the capacity to do that. And this is your journey. Like as a soul, this is your journey to move through this whole dynamic, to move through this wounding. And I know, Ken, we were talking yesterday, and you're like, well, what if, like, I've spent my whole life, like, doing this, and, like, I feel like I've waited to the last minute. It's like, that's okay, like, we're all on, it's the journey, it's not the destination. So the journey is the unfolding of, like, removing the interference, the things that have been blocking your true frequency, your true self from coming back out, right? So this journey of unfolding and everything that you're doing and why you're here this weekend is a part of kind of waking up to all of this and waking up to the things that you need to do, because, like, the universe knows that you're going to succeed. The universe wants you to succeed and is, like, your team, like, cheering you on and supporting you along the way of this unfolding and this blossoming of your true self. So, yeah. Hard to honor our truth when navigating the minefield of others' expedience or experience. I'm not sure. And what does honoring your truth look like? Tomorrow will be about that for sure. Hard to honor our truth when navigating the minefield. It is. It is. And this is why it is so important and tomorrow we're really going to talk about a lot of this, but this is why it's really so important to slow down, because conditioning is a reaction. So when you have a moment like a trigger, right? And then the condition is like, I know this trigger, so I know how to respond. So you're on autopilot. So you do that response, right? And this is where the inner guidance is so powerful. This is what we're going to talk about tomorrow too. But this is why the inner guidance is so powerful, because the inner guidance tells you the very moment that you're triggered. And the thing is that most of the work that we do in society for healing is like after the fact, right? It's like after the triggers have already happened. But the real transformation happens in making a different choice in the moment that you're triggered, because then you're changing the loop. Right? So normally you have the trigger, whatever it is, and I say trigger, the trigger is like, oh, this is that pain thing. This is that problem thing. This is that, oh, I remember what this is and it hurts and I want to avoid it kind of thing. Right? So whatever that trigger is, you're automating that process. And so that's what we've been doing. We've been automating that process and not really being conscious about it. But when you start understanding how your inner guidance system works and how it's communicating with you and the language that it's using to communicate with you, then you can get to the very point of right when that trigger happens and leaving enough gapping so that you're no longer doing that automatic habit. And then you can start to connect with what is true versus what is like the habit. It's like seeing through the goggles of your fear in your past versus, oh, let me change these goggles and really see what's going on and respond to the truth in this moment. What is it that I want to really do in this moment? So, but we're going to get into that. Yeah. So many triggers, right? Mm. Yes, I understand now why we suffer. And now to integrate and tame my nervous system. Yes, I love this journey that we're on. It's tough to, yes, yes, it is a paradox, isn't it? Yeah, and it's a beautiful and challenging like thing. It's so hard, and there's so much beauty in the suffering too. I mean, it's such a paradox, right? But yeah, don't worry, we're gonna get into so much, so much. All right, so let's see where I am. Where am I? Where am I on this thing? Some beliefs were handed to you directly, others were conclusions. Yes, others. So some beliefs you were taught, right? And then you adopted those beliefs. And so they became yours, but they're really someone else's, right? And then there are beliefs that you made conclusions about. So, like, there may be the belief of like, somebody told you, "Oh, you're terrible at that. You're so bad at math, or you're so bad at these things, or whatever." And so you adopted this as true. "Oh, I'm terrible at math." Like this was my stepdaughter was like this, right? Like her mom used to tell her all the time, "Well, you're so bad at math. I'm terrible at math. We've never been good at math." And I'm just like, what are you talking about? Like, you are so good at math. But like, she just adopted this narrative and it became her truth. It became like what was true for her, even though she could no longer see like what was happening in the moment. And that's what conditioning does. Conditioning prevents you from seeing the truth, just like let's say the typical conditioning thing, right? Like you're going down the street as a kid, and this dog bites you and it scares the crap out of you, right? And then from there on out, every single time you see a dog, you're like, that dog's going to bite me. But even if that dog is like wagging its tail and it's totally happy, you can't see that. All you see is like, that is a terrible, vicious dog, and that dog is going to hurt me. So that is a really good example of like what that conditioning does. You're now unable to see what's really happening in that moment and to really respond to that moment with clarity and truth, And so it's really like learning that. And then again, in this slide, there are conclusions that we make too. So for an example, with drawing on the wall, you made the conclusion it's not safe to do this. It's not safe to be my creative self. It's not safe to do so I need to dim myself. And so you start creating these beliefs as adaptations, for survival. So again, some of them are just things that you adopt because you were told them. And so you decide that that's what's true. And the messed up thing, this is one of the things that I realized as a mom, when I was like a new mom, I realized that your kids are programmed, right? They're programmed for what is considered normal to them. They don't know that however you're acting and the things that you're doing, they don't know whether or not they're quote normal or not normal. They just normalize it, right? Which is why you end up like normalizing abuse and normalizing, destructive behavior and all these different things because you just think, well, just this is just the way that it is, right? And so this is a lot of the challenge. So yeah, yeah, definitely. Um, how to separate conditioning from moment by moment truth when you have said it is reactionary and familiar. Yeah, and that's the trick is slowing things down. But it's hard. It is hard because your nervous system in that moment is getting excited, right? It's triggered, right? That's why that word is triggered, right? So your nervous system is activating, and because it's activating, you want to take the first response, the first thing that you can do to ease your nervous system, right? And because it doesn't feel safe to be sitting with this intensity of like, I'm totally triggered and I'm totally upset about this thing, so I need to ease this. I need to ease this. And the work that we're going to be talking about tomorrow is about understanding that process, because If you're constantly in a state where you're not okay with being with your nervous system in an excited state, and you haven't learned how to regulate your nervous system and hold that state of excitability, in that moment long enough to start seeing what the truth actually is, then you're stuck in that looping, right? So there's a process. There's a process for sure. All right. Let me get some more water. Gosh. So we are meaning making machines is what we do. And so what I was talking about just a second ago, right? Like, sometimes we are we are adopting beliefs of other people, right? And making those our beliefs. Just like with the math that she was doing, and she decided that was true. And then it became true. It became her reality, right? And then the other thing is that, you are creating those things. You are making meaning about different events all the time. So something might happen and you're like, this is what that means. This is what that means, and this is what that means about me. So this is what we're constantly doing that all the time. So yeah, the meaning you made about the event shaped who you became. And we don't just experience things, we decide what they mean about us, about others, and about life. So yeah, we are constantly deciding, this is what that means. This is what that means about you. This is what that means about me. And we are doing that meaning making based on the glasses, the lens that we're wearing. So if I am wearing the lens of fear and trauma and conditioning and programming, then all the meaning that I'm going to be making about those circumstances is going to be through that lens. Which is why you have to learn how to slow down that process so that you can remove the glasses. I'd take them off, but they're hard to put back on. But then you could remove the glasses of the trauma, put on the glasses of your true self, and the true self's glasses, they don't have anything blocking your ability to see what's really there, right? So you're able to, for the first time, look and go, what's really happening in this moment? And then you're checking in with yourself. How do I really want to respond to this moment? Because now I can see that the dog is wagging his tail, right? And that I'm actually safe. Oh, maybe I can pet this dog. Maybe this dog is really nice. Wow, now I can rewrite some of that programming. Sometimes the dog is really nice. And if I pay attention to the dog and notice the signs, I can interpret whether or not the dog is mean or the dog is nice. And look at, you've completely changed the narrative and you've seen things completely different. So yeah, that's kind of how it works. All right. Guilt feeling came to me when you said our kids are conditioned too. I feel bad, like I failed them. Why did that feeling arise? I love this. I love this question so much because we suffer with that. As parents, we're going to suffer with that. And I am sorry to tell you that. I suffer with that all the time. I have a teenager, and oh, there are so many times that I feel that way and I feel like I've failed her. I feel like, oh, what have I done? But just know that she is connected. Well, she or yours. I'm going to say she because mine, right? But your child is connected to source also, right? And your child is on their own journey of working through their own trauma. And you cannot protect them from that trauma. I have tried. I have tried to protect her from the trauma and the different things, and it happens anyway. There's some form of trauma that they're going to go through, and the best thing that you can do is be there for it. I thought that I was protecting her the entire time, and I didn't know that my nervous system, because I was wired for fear and wanting to keep her safe, my nervous system taught her to regulate, or actually to stay dysregulated in a fear-based state. And I had no control. I didn't even know that I was doing that. So I was essentially giving her the ancestral trauma. And I couldn't change it. It was just a part of what happens. We all experience some form of trauma. The thing that you can do that is going to be the best help is helping your child to work through whatever those moments are, and day 3 is really going to help you with that, because it's really about learning how to be in that triggered state without like auto responding, to like, I need to like I can't think of the word right now, but essentially like pacify the situation like quickly so that I'm just done with it. So most people would be like, I need to avoid this, or I need to run away from this, or I need to distract myself, or I need to eat food, or I need to smoke a cigarette, or I need to, whatever the addictive behaviors are that distract you or pull you away from the discomfort that you're feeling in that trigger. Instead, you need to teach them how to sit with that discomfort without judging the self, without bringing in the wounded narrative where you're beating yourself up, and crucifying yourself for, all the different things. But learning, and I'm going to talk about this tomorrow, but there's so much around this that you're learning how to do so that you can be in that state of like, I can feel these things, I can let these things move through me, and I'm not letting the narrative like attack me. I'm learning how to shift the narrative, and I'm learning how to heal the wounds so that I can sit in that state of discomfort and be okay with it. And when you can do that, then those trauma events will happen and those things will happen, but you can process it, and it doesn't become a new trauma. It doesn't become something that you need to deal with again, that you've learned how to process that stuff in a healthy way. So I hope that answers your question. But yeah, the guilt. So pay attention to the narratives that show up, because that's your wounding. Okay, so when you think something like, oh God, I've messed up my kids and like all this stuff or whatever, and then you'll start hearing more like narratives, right? And look at those, because that's your wounding. Where is that coming from? Who said that before? How has that come up for you before? Like, get to the root of that and understand that, because it came from somewhere, and it's not true. You're not, like, if you're questioning like, am I fucking up my kids? Then you're not, because you care, So if you care and you're reflecting of these things, then you're doing the best that you can do. And there's things that are going to happen. Like, as a parent, you have to, oh God, it's so hard being a parent, because especially when they're teenagers, they're off doing things that you can't protect them from. You're like, and you just have to be okay with that, and it's a whole lot of working on your own triggers through that process. And I tell you, there's a lot of nights that I'm up late, like doing a lot of that process work, because I'm feeling very triggered and activated in my nervous system, because those fears are coming up, and those are mine. Those are my fears. They're not hers. They're not hers to hold. They're not hers to deal with. Her She's figuring out her own connection to source and her own journey through all these different things, and she's got to trust herself. So I hope that helps. I always need to remind myself that my parents were really young when I was born. Yeah, they were still very much operating in their dominant selves. Yeah. And and sorry, I'm trying to read this. As was I, there we go, when I was raising my kids. Yeah. Yeah. And we don't know. You don't know. It's like a 2020 hindsight, right? You have no idea that like what was your best intention turns out to like be a problem. The whole time that thought I was like protecting my daughter and telling her like, be careful about that and be careful about these. And then I gave her a nervous system to worry about things. So the whole thing that I was doing to try to protect her was actually part of the problem. So, yeah, you do as good as you can do, and that's all you can do. And you just have to know, you just have to be able to like use the adult mind, use not just the adult mind, but the true mind, the true self. You want to call it your higher self, whatever you want to call it, doesn't matter. It's just a word. But that true, authentic self, when you come from that self that's not like, you should have done it this way and you're totally wrong and this is fucked up and what's wrong with you, like that's the wounding self, right? Anything that's making you feel bad is coming from the wounded self. And anything that is giving you clarity and understanding and compassion is coming from that true self. And so you're wanting to learn how to shift that. But again, we'll talk about that in day 3. So, yay, yay. All right, all right. So, whew, I'm getting like, I should have worn like a tank top. I'm getting all heated up here. All right, so the meaning becomes our lens. So the meaning that we're giving everything becomes like the goggles that we're looking through. It becomes the filter through which we are now filtering reality. So everything, all those beliefs, all that meaning, all those things, these are now clouding my capacity to see clearly, which means that every time I look at someone or something, that clouded meaning is interpreting them. I am generally, and no one is ever truly seeing you. It is really hard for people to truly see you because they are seeing you through their own lens of their experiences and their wounding and their conditioning and the things that have happened to them. And so that's what we're doing, right? And so like it is very rare that you get to the point when you're actually able to truly see someone and truly participate in reality for like what's really happening in that moment. And I have a great example of this. So I was driving the other day. Okay, when I say the other day, it was like years ago, but I was driving the other day, and I live in this area that is like right on the border of like hoity-toityville. So it's like beautiful houses and lush and green and really pretty. And I'm really fortunate to be like right on the border of it. So, and I love that because I love how much like in the environment and the nature's beauty and everything just makes me feel so like healed and nurtured. And so I'm driving along, and where we live, we have like a really bad homeless problem. And so I saw this person and I'm thinking, oh no, it's a homeless person down in this area. Like usually they're like downtown. And the problem is that they tend to not be very respectful about like their garbage. And they may like camp in a certain area and then like leave everything there and abandon it and leave all the trash for everyone else to pick up. And then they'll go off and like go elsewhere. So so there's like not a lot of respect for this whole thing. And so I was getting like really activated by that. My nervous system was like, oh no, like this is going to be a problem. And then there's going to be more of them. And then it's going to really upset like this environment because it's so beautiful, and I was getting like so worked up about it. And I was like, oh my God, what about this and then this and then this or whatever. And then I was like, Felicity, stop for a minute. And let's look at what is really true right now. And I'm like, I don't actually know that he's a homeless person. He just looks like one. He could have just been like getting off of work. He could have been working on a car. Who knows what he was doing? But my mind made an immediate assumption about this situation because I was seeing it through a particular lens instead of seeing what was really happening in that moment. And this is the problem with society, is this is what we're doing. We are seeing everything through these assumptions and these lenses instead of what is really happening in that moment. So yeah, it's so important to really start noticing like the lens, and the meaning that you're giving everything and the beliefs that you have, because all of those things are constructing your identity, they're constructing your reality, and they're keeping you in those things. So I hope that makes sense. I just recently noticed in the last couple of days that my nervous system reactions and making their family nervous systems, and yes, yeah. Yeah, you are training. The good news is you can change that, so don't stress about it. But you can be a role model for something different now. You can start changing how you respond and react to things. You can start changing how your nervous system handles things. And that's what I'm doing because like I said yesterday, my whole family, like my mom and my dad, like high anxiety people, both of them had panic attacks. I had my first panic attack, when I was a teenager. I thought I was going to die, and it was so bad. And so much throughout my life, like I've had to, oh God, I can feel the panic attack coming on and I need to figure out how to regulate myself and do these things. And I've had a lot of trauma in my life, like a lot. So I had every reason to have anxiety and to have stress, about these things. But yeah, my nervous system, of course, is now all geared up in that fight or flight, kind of situation, like all the time. And I tell you, my whole life, my stomach has been a tight ball of like that like all the time. And I'm finally like learning to, after years after years of doing that, of finally being able to release the tension. And it's like your body is in this state of hypervigilance and stress of like, I'm preparing for the worst. Right? And so like learning how to change that, like that. And that's the work that I do with my clients too, is really like learning how to change this, because it's an autopilot thing, right? It's an autopilot of, there are people that, are born into this world who they have the right support, they have the right environment, so they have the conditioning of like the world is a safe place. And my needs are going to be met, right? It's probably rare, but right? I mean, there are those people. They have like that whole environment because their family and their environment, they understood these things, and so they gave the kids the capacity to understand these things and to regulate their nervous system and to do all that. And so they're not bracing, and so like as the moment is unfolding, at them, they're not bracing for that moment. They're like leaning into it, like, yeah, this is going to be fun, like let's see what the next moment is. Like, I'm not scared, And then those of us who have been through a lot of trauma and a lot of pain and a lot of suffering is like, I don't know about the next moment. Like it might not be good. All the other ones weren't so great. So, we'll see. And you're like constantly in this, like, what's going to happen next? What's going to happen next? And that state of like tension and resistance and whatever is like blocking your ability to receive abundance, to receive the universe's, like, all the wonderful things that the universe is trying to give us, right? And all those things. So that state is preventing all of those things. So if you're having like challenges with like, like money and bringing in consistent money, has a lot to do with your nervous system. So, yeah. All right. All right, let me check your question here. What if people's actions are disrespecting and goes against your values? If we allow that does not change if we allow that does not change other people's behavior, allowing anger does not. All right, give me a second. I'm having a hard time understanding your question here. Um so anger is good, depending on how you embody it. Um you don't want to necessarily enact the anger at people. But anger is really healthy because it's letting you know that boundaries have been crossed. That this is not okay. Not okay for me at all. And so it's learning how to really pay attention to like that anger and what that's activating in you and why it's activating in you, and then meeting whatever that is, and working through whatever that is to get to the resolution that's going to bring you peace. So yeah, if there's like people that are disrespecting you, then whether or not it's getting out of that situation, whether or not it's communicating like, hey, that's disrespectful, whatever you need to do in that moment, it's learning how to do that. But and we're going to talk about this tomorrow too, but it's learning how to do that from your true identity versus your fear-based identity. Because if you're angry and you've got your fear-based lenses, right? You've got your conditioning and your fear and your trauma, and you're seeing through the trauma lenses, right? And you're angry, you're just gonna lash out all hell, right? You're just be like, I'm so angry about this because I am hurt, and I'm gonna share that hurt with you, and I want you to know how much I'm hurting, and all that stuff, right? But when you shift the lens to the true self, right? And then you're like, I feel this anger. And then what do I do with this anger? Where is this anger coming from? How does this anger want to manifest through me? What is it that I need to do? What kind of action do I really need to take in this moment? Right? It's learning how to assess those things, but from a different identity, from a different lens. Does that make sense? Um, we need to be able to receive that abundance frequency. Yes. And it's not, but the thing is that you can't just receive it from a state that is incapable of receiving it. So, if you start receiving abundance, but that abundance feels new and scary to your nervous system, then your nervous system will be like, no, 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 I can't handle that. I can't. And that's what happened to me for many years, so my business would start to take off and things would start to happen. But it felt so unsettling that my nervous system would pull it right back into what felt safe. So yeah, and again, it comes back into the, can you hold, can you sustain that new frequency, that new state of being? So yeah, hope that makes sense. All right, did I say that? Your identity isn't just what you think about yourself. It's the self you're unconsciously living as. You don't just have beliefs about who you are, you perceive, feel, choose, and live from them. So, yeah, your identity is all of that stuff, right? Your identity is your beliefs. It's, the lens that you're looking through, and so if I'm looking through that wounded lens, then my identity is shaped all around that, right? And the people who I surround myself with, and the choices that I make, and the meaning that I'm giving everything, all has to do with that, right? But when I learn how to shift into the new identity and the new self, and I learn how to start sustaining that, then I'm acting from that new identity and that new vibrational state and those different things. It's just learning how to sustain that. That's the challenge, right? So your identity organizes your reality. So who you believe yourself to be shapes what you notice, what it means, how you feel, what you choose, how you act, and what you create. Your life begins organizing around the identity you're living from. Now, this is important because what this means is that your identity isn't just your identity, it becomes your reality. So everything that you like believe, and this is, I'll get into the RAS in a second too. I know that slide's coming up soon, but yeah, everything that you believe and the things that you're looking at, the things that you're noticing, like you're noticing those things because you're looking for them, because you're expecting them, because of the lens and the way that you're seeing things, or you're feeling things because of that lens. So like if you're looking through the wounded lens, then you're going to be always kind of feeling a little hurt and a little like wounded about things. And so let's say somebody cuts you off, right? And immediately you're going to be like, oh, I'm the victim again. Like, I can't believe they did that to me. And you're going to be so angry about that instead of maybe like, oh, wow. Oh, that person must be having a really hard day, or there must be some sort of an emergency or whatever. Like we're gonna take things personally, if we're looking through the wounded lens versus the true lens, and things like that. So it's completely shaping like how you perceive your experiences and the meaning that you're giving everything. So you can really see how then as you're taking action from that identity, right? So let's say you have the identity that, life is going to be hard, and that there's a lot of suffering and that people are assholes, and all these different things, right? Then you're going to keep creating more of that. And then you'll notice that your life is just filled with like a bunch of assholes and people getting in your way and like dumpster fires of problems and like all these things happening because this is what your brain is subconsciously looking for because this is what you've experienced in the past. And so it's just normalizing like this is the way life is, right? And so this is part of, and again, I'm going to talk about this soon, but the RAS, the reticular activating system of the brain, that's what it does. It's looking for things to validate like what you believe is true. So whatever you believe, your brain is going to look for evidence of that. But that can work in your favor because if you believe that life is going to be a good thing and that every difficulty is actually for your benefit, then your RAS is going to look for proof of that to be true. So I think there's a quote, I can't remember exactly what it is, but it's like, if you believe that you can or can't, that either way it's true. And that's true. It's absolutely true. So what you believe, you need to start evaluating what you actually believe and decide if you want to still believe those things. If you need to decide if you want those things to define your life and who you are. And I had to do a lot of that in my life. I really had to start thinking about it, because you don't realize how much you're actually like limiting yourself by your definitions of yourself. Like as I was aging, and I've had a lot of health problems in my life due to trauma and different things like that. And so, and I was in a wheelchair for many years and different things like that. So I was really struggling. I could barely stand up. I could barely get out of bed. And so that really created that belief structure of I'm weak, and I'm not capable. And then when I started, like, I got a hip replacement, and and I've been working on healing myself, and I did so much healing work on myself. So I started like healing all the joint pain and all the things that were keeping me bedridden or whatever. And it got to the point where I started realizing, like, wait a minute. I'm not actually weak. I'm actually strong. And I started like going, well, what other beliefs am I like still limiting myself by? And do I really want to continue believing those things? So you need to do like kind of an overhaul of this. And it's funny because I actually did this in a very different way, like when I got married. So there are a lot of belief structures around, the wedding ceremony, right? Like, one side of the family sits on the right side, the other family sits on the left side. The bride has to go down with her father, and the groom is like, down at the end, and all this stuff, and all these things. And I was like, you know what? I want to scrap all of that because none of it has any meaning to me, and I'm only going to do the things that have meaning to me, and I'm going to create my own ceremony. So I decided that my husband to be and myself were going to walk down the aisle together. So we walked down the aisle together, and that was great. And I did like all of this because I'm like, sit wherever you want, people. And I just like, I decided like I'm going to rewrite the narrative of this wedding. So why not rewrite the narrative of my life, rewrite the narrative of like who I really am? So yeah. Yeah. All right. Tomorrow is about how do you sustain the new frequency. So I'm not going to give you hints today. But yes. Um, is it possible to change life's trajectory? Beliefs, are they part of the soul's contract? Can beliefs be changed? Yes, absolutely. All beliefs can be changed. And that's what you're here to do. You are here to redefine yourself. You are here to, right now, you have all these beliefs that are not yours. They are not like actually defining you, because if they were defining you, they'd feel good. Like if the belief was true and resonated with you, you would feel it. You would know, yeah, that feels true. That feels true, right? I mean, how many times have somebody said something to you and immediately you're like, no, that's not true. Like you could just feel it in your being. You're like, that is wrong. Or vice versa, right? That it feels so true, right? So you will know truth when you feel it, right? And when you feel those beliefs, they feel like shit. And they feel like shit because they're not true. So, and we'll get into that tomorrow. But yeah, yeah. All right. So in all the things that you're doing, like every time you're taking action from that lens, you're rehearsing that same identity. So you're perpetuating that same person, that same life, and those same things. So it's just going to keep on happening again and again and again. And it's because you're making choices from that lens. You're making choices from that identity. You're you're not slowing, and again, we're going to talk about this tomorrow, but you're not slowing down enough to create a long enough gap and to regulate your nervous system enough so that you can see clearly in that moment what's really happening and tap into your true self, and then speak and act and do things and respond and engage from that truth versus the other identity, the wounded identity, or whatever it is, the survival identity. So yeah. So you are rehearsing this identity. Every time you think from it, interpret through it, react from it, or choose from it, you are reinforcing it. So you got to keep that in mind, and it's challenging. It is challenging because you're not always, well, most of the time, you're probably not aware that you're even doing it. And this is where the inner guidance system is pivotal, because the inner guidance system is reacting to that internal process that you're doing. And it's telling you, hey, you're triggered. Hey, you're using the wounded lens right now. Hey, you're out of alignment. But most of the time, we don't realize that that's what it means. We're not paying attention and we're not interpreting those internal signals correctly to realize that we have this navigation system inside of us that's trying to orient us towards like the behavior that's moving us towards alignment, instead of like the identity that we've been in, that we've been perpetuating. So, this is the challenge here. Your nervous system will always try to bring you back to what feels normal and safe. Yeah, because that's its job, right? Its job, your nervous system is to keep you safe, right? To what's going on? How do I respond? Let's fill you up with all these different things so that you can respond quickly, right? And so that's what the nervous system is designed to do. And what is happening is that it is responding to the thoughts that you're thinking. So those thoughts are what's triggering the nervous system into that fight or flight response, and those protection things and things like that. So it's the way that you're seeing things that is activating the nervous system to respond in those ways. And so it's like, this isn't safe, or this is this is what's comfortable. This is what I feel like staying in, because this is like what I've known. This is what's going to protect me, or whatever. And when you start like stepping into the unknown, when you start stepping into like being your true self, that's scary, right? So it's going to activate the nervous system. And if you don't have a nervous system that knows how to like regulate and to be with that discomfort in that moment long enough to make that shift and sustain that shift, that you're going to slide right back into comfort. Does that make sense? Do you guys understand what I'm saying with that? This is important. And can you guys resonate with this? Like, am I nailing this for you? Are you guys like feeling what I'm talking about here? Because this is like the definition of my life. Like, these are the things that I have been struggling with like my entire life, and it's funny too, because like I had no idea this was going to be the work that I was going to do. Yeah, totally right. Because, like, but it's like how your life's journey is like shaping like that whole your purpose and like everything, and like what you're here to do and all this stuff, like it kind of unfolds and ends up working together. So everything that's happened to me in my life, and the fact that my dad, the things that he taught, and then the fact that both of my parents were psychology majors, and all these things, and talking about like being at the dinner table and talking about like psychology and the conditioning of the mind, as a very young person, so like all of these things were building up to that. Anyway, I am skeptical about changing beliefs as I did center point affirmations via theta wavelength, building new experiences to reinforce different beliefs, not always easy. It depends on the tool. There are tools that don't work for people. So, that's the difficulty. And also, it's not going to help you at all if you have the belief that you can't change your beliefs. So you will want to work on that. You're going to need to create proof for yourself, starting with small beliefs. Start with small beliefs and work on changing those beliefs. But it's working on changing the narrative of what you're telling yourself and really learning how to feel the truth of that new belief, right? And that's learning how to use your inner guidance system to do that, because your inner guidance system is the inner mechanism that tells you those things. So like if you say something, like you say an affirmation, for an example, and you might say an affirmation like um I'm super healthy and radiant and I have all this money and all this stuff, right? And immediately your system is like, this is not true. Like, I can't say that as an affirmation because I know it's not true. And so that's the problem with affirmations, is that you're constantly saying something that's putting you into a state of resistance because there's a part of you that's like, that's bullshit. I don't believe that, you know? And so you need to shift to beliefs that are true. And when you feel the truth of that belief, that truth will help you to solidify that belief over the wounded beliefs, which aren't true, but have a lot of experience behind them to make them feel true. But a real true belief will be more powerful than a false belief. Does that make sense? Do you understand what I'm saying there? So yeah, it's going to take some work, and it's unfortunate that you've been working with beliefs with a tool that obviously does not work for you. And it doesn't mean that that tool doesn't work for others. It just, we have to acknowledge that there are some things that work for one person that don't work for another. And that's why, like, there's so many different ways to do things, and this is why, like, in the approach that I teach and do with my clients, it's many facets. So I don't just have one system and one way of doing things. I have many different things that are happening at the same time, and I'll be explaining that tomorrow too, to help you to better understand, because you can't just shift the narrative and call it good. You can't just constantly being like, oh, this is belief, so I'm going to change the belief and then I'm going to go and I'm good, because there's a part of you underneath that's like, I'm still wounded, I'm still hurt, I'm still believing these other things, I'm still stuck in this state. So that energy is going to keep pulling you back into those old narratives and those old states and those old things. And so if you don't, also address that, then no matter how many times you shift the narrative and the belief, this is going to keep happening. So these are the things that I've learned, like when I've been working with myself and working with clients. Like, it has to have all these different facets, in order to, like, address everything that's happening at the same time. Does that make sense? So, yeah. All right. The interference feels like you. You don't experience your identity as an identity. You experience it as reality. So the lens that you're looking through becomes invisible to you. This is one of the biggest problems. Because most of the time we don't realize that we're looking through a lens. We don't realize that we're seeing life through the wound. We just see it as life. This is just life. This is just how it is. We don't realize that we're creating meaning or a narrative or something about this, or we've created a certain identity and now we're seeing things through that identity or whatever. We just normalized it. So this is what makes it really challenging to do it on your own, because you're in it. you're in the situation, you're in the trigger, and you don't have the perspective to see like what's happening in that moment. Oh, I am seeing through a lens. Oh, this is what's happening, or whatever. And so like when you do this work yourself, when you're doing it and trying to figure it out, it can be more challenging because of these things, because you're inside of it. You don't have that perspective. So yeah, I hope that makes sense. And as far as, being skeptical about changing beliefs, I get that. I understand, like, I understand kind of where you're at and the challenges that you're feeling. And it is hard. It is hard to feel like, am I ever going to get out of this state? And aren't these beliefs true? And things like that. And it's going to take work. It's going to and but you're doing the work. And don't be too disheartened and discouraged, because I've seen you consistently like trying to figure it out and trying to do the work, in the Facebook group that we were in, and all the times that we've spoken and things like that. Like I've seen you like putting in your due diligence, and really wanting to figure it out day in and day out. So I see you, and you're gonna get it. You're gonna get there. And the thing that I've learned the most about that type of like feeling like you're constantly like not getting there, and like you're constantly like in that state of suffering, is the reward is going to be that much better. And I've seen that consistently. Like the harder the struggle, the more amazing the reward. And it may be that you might be helping people to do the same thing. I don't know if you feel called to do that or not, but whatever it is, that outcome. And remember how I was talking about yesterday, how like your wound becomes your superpower? Like whatever all that wounding is that you're working through, like those are going to be like your most amazing strengths and superpowers, like once you get through all of this. So yeah, yeah, I hope that helps. All right, so your lens equals your identity and your frequency. So the way that you're seeing things and what you're seeing through, that becomes who you are, and that also becomes what you're vibrating as. And remember how we were talking about yesterday that the universe is only seeing or responding to your frequency, right? So, sorry, I'm getting some download information, so it's like spacing me out a little bit for a second there. So yeah, ooh, that was a good one. Ooh. All right. So, yeah, your frequency is what the universe is responding to. It is constantly giving you back whatever you're vibrating at, whatever your whatever your frequency is, whatever your identity is, and that is also, your dominant frequency. Your dominant frequency is whatever you've learned to sustain at. Most of the time, your dominant frequency is whatever state of wound you're still embodying, right? But your dominant frequency shifts, right? It slowly shifts, and it slowly shifts eventually to the point where your dominant frequency and your true frequency become the same thing. So that's what you're like working towards, right? So your dominant frequency is just the thing that you keep falling back to as your like safety net, as you're working up to making your dominant frequency into your true frequency. Does that make sense, you guys? Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. So yeah, what you believe became who you thought you were, and who you thought you were became the frequency or dominant state that you lived from. So the meaning that you're giving things creates your identity, which creates your lens, which creates the frequency, whatever frequency that you're embodying, and the universe is responding to that frequency. So no matter what you're doing, if you're doing all these affirmations, if you're doing a manifestation board, if you're saying all sorts of different things, if you're saying mantras and you're trying to step into that thing, the universe isn't hearing any of that. it's it's hearing the frequency underneath it. So if you're saying things, like I'm going to become healthy, wealthy, and wise, but there's a part of you that doesn't believe it, and you're still living in that state of, I don't really think that I can make money, and I don't know if I can really do these things. That's what the universe is responding to, is that frequency underneath everything. Um, we really only learn when we are struggling. When life is easy, we just skate along. Yeah, that tends to be true. And yes, I agree with you. We should welcome struggles rather than dread them. Yeah, and like things that show up that you're like, um, and I'm not always good at that either. Like there'll be things like, for an example, right before the 3-day event started, right when my internet went out at 5 o'clock in the morning on the same day that I was supposed to go live. And I'm like, oh no, right? And gotta take off my sock here. And I'm, instead of going like, all right, somehow this is going to benefit me. I don't know how. I'm not clear on how this is going to be a benefit, but it's going to benefit me. And learning how to make that shift, and see those things as the universe is on my side. The universe is trying to support me. The universe, and it might show up and look like things that don't feel good, but they are good. Like, for an example, the dark night of the soul. The dark night of the soul feels like crap. Right? It feels like some of the worst things that have ever happened to you. But it's actually like one of the most beautiful things that can happen, because what happens is, like I was saying yesterday, you get like so far into the wounded state, so far into the fear, that you're like so far away from your true self. You've gotten so far lost that the universe is like slingshotting you back into alignment. And that feels terrible. It feels so bad because it's ripping you away from like everything that all the people who have supported like that state that you were in, where they all wanted you to feel lousy too, so that it could validate them feeling lousy as well, right? And so you're being ripped out of all that stuff. And the best thing that you can do when you do that is let go. Because like if you're trying to hold on to the people and the situations and everything that you were identifying with in that state, then it's going to hurt. It's going to hurt a lot more than if you just let go and surrender and trust and know that the universe has got your back, and reconnect with yourself and get back into that state of alignment that it's asking you to do. Then you're actually leveling up really fucking fast in that opportunity of something that would have taken years may take a really short period of time. So, but in that moment, it looks like your whole world is falling apart, but it's falling apart for a really good reason. So, does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. All right. So, your spotlight of consciousness. I love this. So, your lens keeps looking for proof that it's right. And your RAS, remember I was talking about that, will always find proof regardless of which lens it is. So change what your consciousness is oriented towards, and you change what becomes available for you to see. So are you looking through the lens of fear? Are you looking through the lens of truth? Are you looking through the lens of all your wounds and your suffering? Are you looking through the lens of your alignment, and true connection to source? Like, where are you putting your consciousness? Because your consciousness is so powerful. Wherever you direct your energy, you are putting that consciousness there. You are affecting things more than you know. I mean, if you look at the double slit, what's it called? Not theory, the experiment, the double slit experiment in quantum physics. They're really in Google it, because I'm not, it's it's awesome. So anyway, what they're essentially showing is that where we put our consciousness and the beliefs and expectations that we have are shaping our reality. So if we believe and expect things to fail, they'll probably fail. If we believe and expect things to succeed, they'll probably succeed, and so we are dictating those outcomes by where we are putting our consciousness and what we are expecting through that and what we are believing. So, and you were talking, Glenda, about, those beliefs and whether or not you can let go of those beliefs. You got to start thinking about, do I want to define myself by these beliefs? Are these the beliefs that I want to define myself by? Because they will. They will, but so will all the other beliefs. So, but the thing is that you can't change a belief that isn't something that you believe yet. That's the difficulty, and that's why you need to do baby steps in the beliefs and orient yourself with a belief that is believable. Something that does resonate with you. So like if you're doing an affirmation, for an example, instead of being like, something that's so far out that you're not there yet, you're doing something like, each day I feel stronger and more capable. Each day I am more connected to my true self. Hey, those things feel true. Okay, so I can believe in that. I can have faith in that. And that's how you start like shifting those beliefs, is by doing the small changes in things that feel true. So yeah, and your, like I said, your RAS is always looking for proof of that, whether or not you're looking through your wounded lens. Yeah, if you're looking through your wounded lens, absolutely, we're going to validate the fuck out of that. We're going to help you to believe that everything that you're afraid of is true. Right? Everything that you don't want will help you validate that, so that, you believe that all of that's true. And that's the difficulty that you're experiencing with that, Glenda, is the RAS. It's going to keep validating for you what you believe, and it's the same the other way. So when you start looking through like the lens of your truth, and really start paying attention to what resonates with you as truth, then your RAS is going to keep looking for more of those things to help support that shift in your beliefs and the things that you're doing. So I want you to know that it's equal on the other end too, that you're going to be able to make those shifts. So yeah, and fear sounds like truth. This is one of those challenges, because you've been living in that state of fear for so long that fear just feels like truth. It feels like what you know. And so it's learning how to make those changes. It's learning how to let go of those narratives that have been defining you. It's learning how to let go of like how you've been defining yourself. And it takes like really taking some time to assess these things. So, all right. I know some of these slides I might be plowing through a little faster just because I've been going quite slow here. So but I hope you guys have been enjoying this. All right. And let me know if you obviously have any questions along the way. All right, so your old identity creates the lens, right? And then that lens and the identity is creating the meaning that you're making in your life. And that meaning is creating the state of your being. And that state of your being makes that you make all the choices from that. You make all your choices from that lens and that state, right? Which means that you're creating your reality from all of those things. And then what happens is that creates a loop. So that creates more evidence for that old identity, and it keeps on looping, and you create more and more and more of that identity, and it keeps fulfilling that because the identity keeps recreating itself through the way that you perceive, interpret, feel, choose, and respond to your life. And the outside world will keep activating that self. This is what you're talking about, Glenda, I think. The outside world will keep activating that self, right? So every time that you get triggered, right? Every time that money gets tight, every time that someone rejects you, every time that something doesn't work, and you fall right back into the old narrative, the old self, the old story. And so you're learning, and tomorrow is going to be all about this of like, what do you do? Like, how do you stop activating that old self? How do you stop staying in that state of conditioning and start making that shift into that new state? Like, how do you do that? And then how do you sustain it? How do you keep that going? It can be so annoying, right? To kind of be stuck in that looping of those habits and that conditioning and all these different things. And then every time you get triggered, you fall right back into it. Every single time. And I tell you, you have to be really careful about this because, even if you do like coaching and different things and you're aware of these habits, and maybe you're being really diligent about that when you're working with someone, but then like you end up sliding back into the old thing because you're not paying attention anymore, because you don't have that person reminding you like, hey, you sliding back into the lens because it's so challenging to recognize when you're seeing through that activated state. And again, this is where the inner guidance system is so like powerful and so good, because once you learn the language of your inner guidance system, you'll know immediately when you start sliding. You'll know immediately when you start sliding back into that activated state. And it will tell you, and I've gotten to the point now where I know instantly. I know I'm sliding back into that old self. I'm sliding back into the wounded state. I'm sliding back into the narratives. I'm sliding back into the lens. I know. I know it immediately. Am I always able to pull myself back out? Sometimes it takes a little longer than other times. It depends on how intense the trigger is, or how intense the narrative is, and how established the narrative is in me, and things like that. But I know it. The instant, because I have wired my inner guidance system. I know the language of my inner guidance system. I know exactly what it's saying to me. And so I have this tool, and that tool is the tool that tells you the second that you're triggered and helps you to reorient to that true state. So, yeah. But your true frequency never disappeared. So even though we get caught up in this wounded state and this wounded narrative and all these different things, I want you to know that your true self, your true frequency is underneath all of that, chomping at the bit, let me out, let me out, let me live life, let me have fun, let me, be my incredible self. Let me do all these things, let me create, let me be, right? But then there's the other self, which is like, but I'm so afraid. It was so scary. These things happened. I don't know if I want to do these things or whatever. And so you're really like kind of struggling between these two aspects of self and learning how to trust and step into that true frequency. But obviously, and this again, tomorrow is about this, but you can't just step into the true frequency without addressing the wounded self, because that wounded self needs that support. It needs to be able to process and work through the things so that it can get on board with this transition. So yeah, we're going to be talking about that tomorrow too. But yeah, you simply spent so long living as a conditioned identity that the frequency just became that dominant frequency. But that what became dominant isn't what is true. It isn't necessarily what is true. And so that's what you're learning how to shift into, is what is true. Yes, the gap between the frequencies, between the selves, right? So the wounded parts of us, that we keep on falling back into, and then the true self, that we keep on touching and keep on stepping into. We keep on having moments of like, oh yes, this is it, this is it, this is it, right? And the gap between the two. And you're working on making the gap smaller, and healing the things and doing the things. And this is your dominant frequency, right? So your dominant frequency is always changing. It's always shifting, and it's eventually getting to the point of your true frequency and your true self, to the point where you are eventually the human embodiment of source through you as an individual, as this individual soul having this incredible experience, without the wounds and the limitations. And you may still have fear, you're going to still have challenges, you're going to still have things that come up, but it doesn't pull you back into the trigger and the wound. You're able to respond to it truthfully in that moment. And what do I do? And how do I respond? And you're connecting with yourself, and you're trusting yourself, and you're, taking action or speaking or whatever it is from that state. I hope that makes sense. So yeah. Woo. So your true frequency does not necessarily mean the same thing as your dominant frequency, but you are obviously working to the point that your dominant frequency and your true frequency will eventually be the same thing. So yeah, your true frequency is who you are beneath all that conditioning. And the dominant frequency is the state that you've practiced living from. So eventually those two will converge, and you're working on closing that gap. And dominance is repetition. It is not proof of truth. And this is important to realize. So like all the things that we've been doing, the adaptations and different things, the beliefs and the narratives, most of those are not true. Most of the things that we've been trained into believing, and the narratives and the things that we're telling ourselves and the things that we are assaulting ourselves with internally, most of that is not true. And so it's learning how to change that and really view ourselves. But the challenge is that we're so filled with like shame and self-hatred and like judging ourselves and crucifying ourselves, that it makes it so hard for us to like sit with that and ask ourselves what's really true, because we don't want to look at those things that we feel so ashamed about or so hurt over or whatever, And there's a process of like learning how to be able to sit with those things. And again, I have processes for all that with my clients. So like, how do you do that? How are you able to sit with those things and not be, like overwhelmed with the shame that you're wanting to avoid, and like the way that you're like constantly attacking yourself or whatever, and like how do you stop doing that? So yeah, we'll talk about that tomorrow. How much does the uncertainty of a new identity impact on belief of change? Also, the frustration can generate reactivity, the most important key in this process. How much does an uncertainty of the new identity impact on belief of change? Let me contemplate on that. Yeah, because it's been a long day for me, so I definitely, my energy is like not as high at this point. I had a whole group session earlier today. So yeah, I'm definitely hitting the end of my day energy. But I wanna come back to that for sure. This is important to me. But how much does the uncertainty of the new identity impact on belief of change? It does. It absolutely does. And all of those things are going to impact it. Like if you're uncertain, if you doubt yourself, if you have a lot of conditioning, a lot of programming around it, um, it's going to highly impact your capacity to shift into that. And it does take a lot of like rewiring of like what you believe and what you understand about yourself. And so yeah, it does take work. But it has to be done in a way where it is not activating the internal shame and the internal judgment. And so that's a specific process that I take people through, so that you learn how to do that. Because otherwise, when you fall back into that state of like shame and criticism and things like that, then you're not able to make those shifts, because you can't sit with it long enough to be able to do that, because that state feels so unsettling. So yeah, it does. Yeah, I know that doesn't quite answer your question, but I promise to get back to that. All right. So, in order to make these changes, your nervous system has to be able to sustain the new state. So, you can start accessing those higher states, and you can start to feel more powerful and clear and open and connected, and touch those moments and have those moments. But if your system has learned, oops, I got a typo there. But if your system has learned that the old state is safe and familiar, it's going to keep pulling you back into that. So, like accessing that state and sustaining that state are not the same thing. And the trick, the difficulty, so you've all been able to access that state. You've all been able to touch it and to feel it and to experience and to have moments with it, and maybe even long moments with it. But then sustaining it, that's the challenge, and that comes to your nervous system. So it's learning how to make those shifts into that new state of being, and then allowing your nervous system to regulate into that new state, which we'll talk about tomorrow. And familiarity is not truth. Yeah, this I've kind of said already. But the old self can feel more like you than the true self, just because you've been in that state longer. It doesn't mean that it's true. It just means that you've been there consistently for so long that it feels like it's your truth. Just like when you're growing up as a kid, right? And you think like all those things are normal, that life is normal. And then you step outside and you see other parents and other things, and you're like, oh, what was I living? Like, oh, maybe that's not true. Maybe these things aren't true, and you start having comparisons and things like that, and you're like, oh, okay. And so, yeah, yeah. And also, like, falling back, just want to let you know, like, when you make that leap, like, let's say you go to a conference or an event or whatever, and you have those, like, that powerful moment where you're like, oh my God, like, I totally understand myself. And you make that leap into like that new self and that new life, even for a temporary moment, right? And then let's say you get home and you sustain it for a little while, but then eventually you fall right back into like that familiar state, right? The dominant frequency. And I want to let you know that falling back into that dominant frequency doesn't invalidate what you experienced. It just means that there's still more work to do. So you touched on it. You had those moments where you're like, I feel that and I am that and I know where to go now, and that is great, because now, like, it's so hard to to access and to step into something that you don't know what it is, right? But when you've touched it, when you've had a moment of like, ah, that's me, like I get it and I feel me and I know what it's like, then you know like what you can start to orient yourself on, and you know how to start to reconnect with that. So you might not be able to sustain it yet, but now you have a touch point. And so just know that those experiences don't invalidate what you experienced, okay? It's just not dominant yet. It's just you haven't figured out how to make that your dominant frequency yet. That's all. That's all. Yeah, this is the same thing. I can I can delete that that slide next time. So you can think all the right things and still be living as the old self. And this is kind of what I was talking about before, right? So like you could be, doing all the mantras. You could be getting up, every day and setting your intentions. And you could be, doing your manifestations each day, and you could be meditating, and you could be like doing all the right things. But if you're still taking action from that old state, if you're still responding and reacting from fear and conditioning and programming, then you're still living as the old state. So the universe isn't hearing this frequency of like all the things that you're doing. It's noticing the underlying current of like what is driving, your thoughts and your actions and the things that you're doing or whatever. So, really starting to understand like this nuance or whatever. So like it's learning how to embody these things. So like when you're doing those things or making those choices or taking those actions or speaking from that place, you're speaking from that true state, not the dominant state that you've been in, unless of course you close the gap, and then that would be your dominant state. But the wounded state, if I'm speaking from wounding, if I'm acting from wounding, then I'm just perpetuating that state. And no matter what I do, so I need to start paying attention to what am I doing in this moment? Am I responding to, or from, sorry, if I am responding from that wounded state, then I'm just perpetuating more of that, in each moment. That's what I'm doing, and if I'm not aware, that I'm doing it, then I'm just doing it completely unconsciously. And that's what we're mostly doing. We're mostly going through our day unconsciously responding to everything from what we consider our normal state of being, which is our dominant frequency. So you can see the problem there, right? Can you see the problem? Do you understand what I'm saying there? And so, like, that's the challenge, because we're not aware that we're doing it. We're not aware that, because it's just normal. It feels normal. This is me. This is what I do. This is how I do it, and that is what is perpetuating that state. So, and the problem is that you're trying to change your life by changing the evidence outside of you. So like, okay, I'm going to change my life by changing my circumstances, changing the things around me, changing like what things I'm doing and all that stuff. But then I'm still acting and thinking and speaking from the old self. So no matter what I do externally, the internal state is the thing that's creating the reality, which means no matter what you're doing out here, you're still doing it from that state. You're still doing it from that same state. So the identity, the lens, and the frequency is the generator. Does that make sense? If life is flowing for a moment, does that mean there's no interference, or is life just giving us a teaser? That means there's no interference. Yeah, if you're in the flow state, if you can feel the flow state and you just feel like, whoo, this feels so good. Yeah, you're in the flow state. There's no resistance. And that's great. And you're learning how to do that. And we'll talk about that tomorrow too. Definitely remind me about that tomorrow. Because tomorrow is going to be all about, what do I do now? Now that I know all this stuff, what do I do? So the pattern isn't the truth of who you are. You know, what you learn to become isn't the same thing as who you are. So that conditioning, that's not you. That was your survival mechanism. The true you is underneath all that. So let me ask you this, if fear no longer gets to define you or make your choices, who are you without it in charge? So I really want you to think about that tonight. Like, if fear isn't the one that's making your choices, if your true self, if you're stepping into what feels true and really acting and speaking from the true self versus your fear, because most of the time we're allowing fear to dictate everything that we're doing. And fear is keeping us in that same place. Fear is the one that's activating the nervous system. Fear is the one that's like, there you are, like you're doing the loop and constantly doing the loop. So if fear is not making your choices for you, who are you without that? And just know that you have not lost yourself, even though sometimes it may feel like who am I? You know, and I've had to do that before. Like, I'll sit up and I'll be like, who the heck am I? You know, and I remember doing this like after I separated from like my husband, because I had gotten so used to like just becoming and doing like everything that like he wanted to do. And I remember just even thinking like, what's my favorite ice cream? Like, I don't even know what my favorite ice cream is. And I just like really started thinking about like, what are my favorite things? Like, what are the things that really bring me joy? What are the things that like really light me up? What are the things that like I could just do and it would never exhaust me because it just lights me up so much, you know? And that was, you know, obviously we talked about that a lot in day one. And I really want you to keep like focusing on that, because that is who you are underneath the protection. And that you wants to come out. That you is here to do stuff. That you is here to live a life and to be radiantly and unabashedly like you. And is that part of you is the you that's like calling you forward and like giving you that pulling and longing feeling and drawing you towards things. Like, that is the you that's doing that. And so you need to start connecting to that part of yourself and listening. Start trusting and listening to that part of you that's like, these are the things that I want. And these are not like, you know, like, so often we treat like these things like, you're going to get the email. My notification just came up about the email. So The email just came up as if this is over, but it's not. Next time I need to automate that a little later. Anyway, as I was saying, all of these things, oh, I think I lost my train of thought. Remind me of what I was saying. Let me know what I was saying. Notifications, ADHD. Anyway, like all this part of you is like underneath, like wanting to live, wanting to come out, wanting to be a part of your life. And, there's so much of that wounded identity that, has pushed that down. And it may feel like, I don't know who that is. I don't know who that is anymore. I don't know what that true self is. And that's okay. That's okay. You're at that process. You're at that threshold where you're figuring those things out. And don't be discouraged because this is perfect timing. You got to trust the universe, trust yourself. That's what I was saying. You got to trust yourself and you got to listen. You got to listen to those desires. And so often we treat those desires like, oh, well, that's just my opinion. That's just how the little me, feels about these things. But you don't realize that you are source. You are a piece of source, an individuated piece of source, come here to embody the unique frequency that is you. You are here to be a unique frequency of source. And what is that embodiment of source? What are you as that embodiment of source? How do you want to embody that energy? How do you want to allow that energy to come through you, and what feels good? And trust that your inner guidance is constantly telling you what feels good and what doesn't. Pay attention and take action on those things and listen to and honor yourself and trust those things. So that's part of the work too. All right, couple more slides. We're done after that. We're done. I know I kind of went way over. All right. Your wound and your purpose often exist on the same energetic axis. So what this means is that, and I was telling you about this yesterday too, like the wound is often a part of the purpose. It's a part of like what you're here to do. So trust that. Don't look at the wound as something that's offensive that I need to get rid of, or I hate it, or I don't want it. It's keeping me limited, or whatever. Your wound is like the diamond in the rough, like, waiting to become the diamond, and so the process of working through that wound and healing that wound and doing those things is what's bringing that diamond forth. And if you hadn't have gone through that process of that wounding, then that aspect of yourself would not have been cultivated in the way that it was. So you've got to trust that the wounds that you're going through, and yeah, they're unfortunate and they feel shitty and they're probably full of like suffering and pain and misery and all that stuff. And trust me, I have lived a lot of that stuff. But I tell you, like I said yesterday, every single suffering and wound and all the things that were like breaking me are all things that have benefited others in some way. And had I not gone through that, I wouldn't have been able to help people in that way. I wouldn't have been able to have those insights. I wouldn't have been able to help, make those changes and to do those things, or to have those insights, or to have those tools, or whatever it was. And so all of those things were pivotal in what I needed to go through. Now, I am not saying that, you need to go through that suffering, or that is a part, like, I don't know if you understand what I'm trying to say here. It's kind of at the end of my day, but yeah, that is so important for us to go through those things and to have those experiences and to work your way through that. and to just trust that your journey is meant to succeed. You are meant to succeed, to heal that wound, to turn that wound into that diamond, into that superpower. That's what you're here to do, and that's what we're going to talk about tomorrow coming up. All right, who am I really? What are my favorite things? Yes, thank you. Yeah, yeah, and really, I encourage you to think about these things, like who am I, and like what is it that source wants me to embody, and you'll recognize that by what you feel pulled towards. What do you feel drawn towards? What excites you? What lights you up? Pay attention to those things. Those aren't in you for no reason. When the more you get lit up, that's energy. That's intensity of that energy lifting you into that higher frequency state of connection of true self, right? So that higher frequency is like, yeah, 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 that's you, that's you, that's you, right? And that low frequency is like, this is not you. So we'll talk about that tomorrow though. So yeah. And the goal isn't to create like some like theory of a better self, like, oh, I have this vision of who I want to be, but that I'm not talking about like some like pedestal vision of yourself. I'm talking about your true self. I'm talking about in all the dirt and glory and embarrassment and like all just yeah, like all the things, whoever it is, like being that like essence of just reveling in whatever it is that you're here to do. Like, I love humor. I love making funny faces. I express myself in certain ways, and like there's points in my life that I have like hid that, or like maybe I won't be like loved and appreciated if I'm like fully myself or whatever. And so you're just asking yourself, well, what is this part of me that wants to come out, that's just afraid. It's just afraid to come out, and start tapping into that person. So yeah, it's not, what am I trying to say? What am I saying here? It's to stop allowing the character, I don't know if I did good vocabulary here. It's yeah, I can't even say it. Stop allowing the character you created for protection to drown out who you actually are. Yeah, yeah, because that's what's happening. That character that is like designed to protect you is like pushing back out like the true self. And so this is why, you're working on an interference. Interference is that personality that you feel like you have to be, in order to like be safe and to be loved, to be accepted, to survive, but then that is blocking out the true self that's trying to come forth. So that's the dynamic. Yeah. Yeah. Last slide. And we're getting to the point for tomorrow, right? If fear and conditioning created the version of you that learned to be, how do you begin living as who you actually are? How do you do it? And that is what we're going to be talking about tomorrow. So today was all about, what are these things that are blocking me? How are they blocking me? What is happening? How do I understand all these things that are blocking me? So I hope that I have conveyed to you well enough about like the interference and the conditioning and the lens and the identity and the narratives, like all of those things are what are doing it. So now what do we do? Like, now we know all this stuff. What do we do with it? And that's tomorrow. Cliffhanger. So if you're not in the Telegram group yet, please get in there. We're going to be answering more questions like this, and I'm sure you've got a lot of questions today about, all the things that we've been talking about today, and I'm sure I know I'm such a tease. Yes, but that's my true identity. So, but yeah. So yeah, come in the Telegram group. Right after this, I'm gonna get myself some food because I'm definitely feeling a little depleted. But then I will come into the Telegram group. I will start answering some questions for you. I will also, I know Glenda, you've put in a few questions in this thread that I haven't answered fully yet. So I'm gonna make sure to answer those for you in there as well. And tomorrow we'll be here, same time, going through all of this stuff together and answering these things. Like, how do you do it now? Now that we understand the problem, now that we understand the limitations, what do we do? How do I do this? How do I begin to remove the interference? How do I start living as my true self? How do I sustain that? How do I keep it so that I am embodying it, so that it becomes who I am? So yeah, that's what we're gonna do tomorrow. Anyway, I hope you guys have a wonderful evening or day or morning or wherever you are in the world. And yeah, definitely share your questions, come into the group, and I will see you guys mañana. Yeah, I'm looking forward to this. So is there any last minute things before I sign off? All right. Well, you guys, this has been incredible, and I'm very much looking forward to tomorrow because I feel like it will be a good resolution for the buildup. I know that we've been building and building and building towards, day 3, and day 2 is probably the most frustrating because you're really starting to see the problem, and it's can be so frustrating when you're just like, now I see the problem, but now I'm immersed in the problem. Like, what do I do? So this is good though, because this is going to stir up a lot of stuff in you, and I want you to let it. Like, let the frustration, like I was talking yesterday, let the frustration come up, and it's good because this is building momentum for change and start asking these questions of yourself that we were talking about today. Start really thinking about, what are these beliefs that are defining me? And do I still want to define myself by these beliefs? And who is this person? Who is this identity that is true inside of me, that is longing to come out and longing to express themselves? And I want to hear about this in the Telegram. So when you go in there, tell me like some of the most, like the biggest insights that you had today and yesterday, and the things that you're learning. I really want to understand like the impact this has been having for you. And then also like what are like the profound like downloads, like, holy shit, I just realized this, or oh my God, I understand myself better, or this is something that I didn't realize about myself, or this is something that I really love and I didn't know that, or I do know it and I want to go towards that. Like, I want to hear all these things. So please share this, and just know that the more that you put into this weekend, the more you'll get out of it. And I am here for you this whole weekend to support you and to be there for you and to answer your questions. So if you're not all in, the only person that's missing out is you on that. Okay. So jump on in. I am here to support you every step of the way for free this entire weekend. So whatever help you need, let me know. And if that means picking my brain, I'm there for it. All right, you guys, you have a lovely time. Oops, hit the mic. Take care, you all.